And joining us now is Ontario's Minister of Finance, Dwight Duncan, the Member of Provincial Parliament for Windsor-Tecumseh. Nice to have you here on TVO.
Good to be back, Steve.
We were in your hometown over the weekend.
Yes.
On Monday night's broadcast.
I was saying I haven't had a chance to see it yet. I'm going to go online and have a look at it this weekend.
It's must viewing.
Absolutely.
Yes, you should. Okay. Let's just share with our viewers what you shared with the people of Ontario this afternoon, namely some of the numbers that have come out of your economic statement today. Michael, if you would, we'll bring these up. The projected deficit now for fiscal year 08-09 is $500 million. Why is that? Because revenues are down, these are projections, 0.9% from the 2008 budget forecast. Expenditures are projected to go up 0.1% as a result of increased health expenditures. Restraint measures being brought into place, projected to be $100 million by the end of the fiscal year. And as well, there's the lower economic growth forecast, 0.1% economic growth, compared to 1.1%, which was forecast in the 2008 budget. Those are some of the numbers. Well, let's go into a little more depth here about why, after a surplus of $2.3 billion a couple of years ago, we now find ourselves $500 million in the red today. What's happened?
Well, there are dramatic shifts in our revenues, but let's keep an eye on what's happening around the world. I mean, who'd have thought even a few weeks ago that the government of the United States would be nationalizing banks? All of these international circumstances impact on families, they impact on businesses, and they impact on governments as well. So we're now projecting lower revenues than we did in our budget. They'll certainly be lower than last year. And I remind you, last year, the year end, our revenues exceeded budget by almost $7 billion. And that points, well, they were good times, relatively speaking, and that points to the volatility, particularly in corporate taxes.
But when you're talking today about a $500 million deficit on a $96 billion budget, which is not that much money. So, I mean, of course, $500 million is a lot of money, but when you compare it to a $96 billion budget, it raises the question of why, in a budget that big, you couldn't find $500 million in savings or efficiencies or something like that. Why couldn't you?
Well, I remind you that we're able to get to that figure because we've drawn down a reserve that we had. It was 800 million, just under 800 million. We've drawn that down by 600 million. There's enormous pressure growth in healthcare and education. Even if you hold the rate of growth steady in healthcare, it's still large. So we've taken what we think is a prudent and balanced approach. All of the economists I've met with and spoken to have told me that making projections at this particular time and given the world economic situation, it's difficult.
Why didn't you draw down the whole $800 million reserve?
Well, because we're only halfway through the year, and there could be changes.
In other words, it might get worse.
We see it might get worse. We see volatility in the world markets today, just today. Whether you're talking about the value of the dollar, we're seeing it happening everywhere. The federal government, I guess today, made the clearest statement yet that they expect deficit next year. These are very real challenges.
Do you think the feds will probably be in deficit this year?
I don't think so. They had a very large asset sale. The telecommunications licenses, I think, netted them another $4 billion this year, which will show on their books. So I think my instinct tells me they'll avoid it this year. But all the economists have told me, too, that the real challenging year will be next year for Ontario and for Canada.
So if Ontario's $500 million in the red right now, it's a given when you introduce the budget next spring, there'll be a bigger deficit, right?
No, it's not. You know, there is that real possibility. But I will remind you that some years when our growth is relatively robust, corporate taxes go down. The opposite happens as well. I think the number we have put it at for this year is based on the knowledge and the information we have today, is accurate. All of us will continue to be vigilant in terms of what's going on in the economy. We'll have our third quarter report once third quarter is done, and then of course we get a real sense on the corporate tax revenues in January and February. Okay. And so that'll, at that point in time, we'll know more still.
You talked today about a $100 million restraint plan, restraint measures. What does that mean exactly, restraint measures?
Well, we are delaying the implementation of some programs. For instance, the ones I cited today were we have a commitment to increase the number of nurses by another 9,000. We had built in money into this year's budget to begin that this year. We're now not going to begin that. In terms of schools, we're reducing the amount of money this year available for what are termed non-urgent repairs. So that's being slowed down. In addition, we're looking at $10 million. And remember, we've only got 5 months really left in the year. So you're talking about $100 million over 5 months. So arguably, it's more like $2 to $220 million on an annualized basis. And then we are going to continue to evaluate where the economy is going. And basically, the one point that I did make in the statement today is that growth in expenditures can't exceed growth in revenues for very long. And so we've chosen, quite deliberately, to run a very manageable deficit because we think the investments we're making in infrastructure and skills training, continuing to reduce corporate taxes, are the appropriate steps to take.
Okay, you've mentioned nursing as part of the nurses you are intending to hire, the schools that may have some of their maintenance delayed. You guys ran pretty hard on a poverty agenda in the last election in 2007. And Howard Hampton pointed out in the legislature today that you did not in your statement even use the word poverty today in your speech. Do we assume that poverty agenda is now pretty backburnered?
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, you know, and remember, today is just an update to my budget in March. I mean, you're going to have my friend and colleague Greg Sorbera on later tonight. He introduced something called the Ontario Child Benefit in his budget in 2007. This year it went up to $600 in July, and it's going to continue to go up. We increased social assistance benefits. We have built in the dental program that is still in the budget. It will begin. My colleague Deb Matthews will be releasing a very comprehensive report in December, and we will begin to act on its recommendations.
So those who say the poverty agenda is now being low-bridged because you can't afford it, so
it is. We are not going to be able to move we're going to move on it, but not as quickly as we might have had things been better. And I think Ontarians understand that. I think Ontarians understand, Steve, the nature of the investments we've made. You know, in the budget in March, $100 million for repairs to social housing stock. There is a lot more to do. We'll not be able to move as quickly as we would like, but we will be moving.
Last year, I think you promised to find $1 billion in savings. Did you find that $1 billion?
Yes, we do, and this is an ongoing process within government. A lot of it's not the sort of thing that we speak a whole lot about publicly. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that this year, given the challenges. But we have something called a results-based planning process that begins. In fact, it's underway now. We've set larger targets for our ministries this year. Those numbers will be reflected. The culmination of that exercise will be in the budget in March.
If you found the $1 billion from the previous year, where were the savings? What did you find it in?
Well, it's a whole range of things. Everything from supply chain management, old programs that are no longer viable. We had, I forget how many. There was literally several hundred 1-800 lines, some of which weren't getting many calls at all. It's things like that, things that would not necessarily be evident to the public.
And they add up to $1 billion?
Well, over time, absolutely, yeah.
And with that money, even with that money, you still couldn't present a balanced budget so far.
When healthcare costs are now almost 50% of the provincial budget, rising at 4 to 6% per year, you can see pretty quickly how you've got to. It's a very fine line to walk to get that balance, to get that prudent and responsible response to what people demand today in our economy.
The word deficit has almost become a dirty word in this country in politics. Many of the other premiers in the country right now have rejected going into deficit. Some of them, like Saskatchewan, are lucky enough that they don't have to, or Alberta. The federal leaders during the last election campaign, all of them, even the NDP, refused even to consider it. Do you think this will be a tough sell for Ontarians?
No. I think public opinion's leading the leaders, if you will. I expect our other provincial colleagues will have challenges in the coming year. Commodity prices are falling, and you know, Ontario's been facing difficulties now for more than a year.
Alberta's on an $8 billion surplus, right?
Well, it won't be $8 billion now, and they're not obviously they're sitting on oil, and Saskatchewan's sitting on oil, natural gas, and potash. So they've got some natural advantages that we don't. But if you look at Ontario relative to our competing U.S. jurisdictions, Michigan, Pennsylvania, California, New York, all of the border states, you'll find that our rate of growth in employment, our rate of growth in the economy has actually been stronger. Interestingly enough, Ontario's had 1.7% growth in employment. The state of Michigan's had a 1.7% decline. If you look in the background documents in my paper, you'll see how that works on a state-by-state basis. So we have been challenged. There's no question that the world economy is impacting us. And again, Ontario is very closely linked to the U.S. economy as well, and That's had an impact.
As you know, the problem is not necessarily just a one-year deficit. It is resisting the habit of making it an annual event. Here's the question. How can we be sure that you are not putting us on the kind of slippery slope we were in the 70s and 80s, where finance ministers, year after year after year, thought it was okay to present a deficit because someday we'll worry about it later?
Well, I think that is where public opinion is. I think public opinion says, look, you know, we understand that over the cycle of life, the cycle of an economy, there will be ups and downs. We eliminated a $5.5 billion deficit that the Conservative government of Mr. Eves left behind, and we have had 3 consecutive surplus budgets. So we didn't take this decision lightly. And the Fiscal Accountability and Transparency Act requires a plan. We will lay out a plan in the budget to show how we'll get out of the deficit.
Will that include raising taxes?
No.
Guaranteed?
We are not raising taxes or fees, and we're going to continue to work to balance the budget at the same time.
Do you think you will pay a political price for presenting this deficit?
I think the people of Ontario are looking for a balanced response to the challenges. I think they want us to continue to invest in infrastructure. I think they want us to continue to invest in healthcare and education and innovation. I think they want us to continue lowering targeted corporate taxes to help keep competitive. I think over time Ontarians will look at a whole range of factors, and I think Ontarians by and large respect and understand the need for a balanced approach in public policy.
Do you think Jim Flaherty's right that corporate taxes are still too high in Ontario?
Well, I haven't heard him say that in a while. And
he said it a couple of weeks ago during the election campaign.
Well, and they're also now talking about their own budgetary problems. We are reducing corporate taxes. We've cut them the last 3 years by $1.5 billion, $3 billion by the time they're fully implemented in 2012. That's pretty significant. We took a targeted approach. We've eliminated the capital tax for manufacturers. We are reducing and equalizing the business education tax across the province. 2 initiatives that, again, were undertaken by my predecessor, Mr. Sabera, who'll be with you later this evening.
Can I ask you a question about him?
Yeah.
Do you think he got out of finance just in the nick of time?
No, I think he served his province well. And I think...
do you think he got out just in the nick of time?
I think the decisions he took over the course of his tenure as finance minister have prepared Ontario well for the challenges that we're facing. You know, there's 100,000 people working on infrastructure projects today that were part of the Renew Ontario program that he set up some 3 years ago.
You think he got out of finance, though, just in the nick of time?
It's
okay. It's okay.
Yes, it's a great job, and in spite of the challenges.
That's Dwight Duncan. He's Ontario's Minister of Finance. We're grateful he came into TVO tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve. Nice to see you again. Thank you very much.